see the owners in the state of shock. Like, I got to spend all that money to turn power on here.
We're seeing the developers convert the space into data centers, which needs a ton of power.
They don't say, oh, how much power can I get into this old building?
Even though their equipment might be in great shape, they have to upgrade that equipment because they might want to bring in a higher voltage. Sometimes they don't realize how much money it's going to take to get it done. One of the things that we've seen over the past 20 years is a lot of effort to restore downtown markets in Western New York. Right. And there are a lot of developers who are going in and they're buying old properties that have been sitting and they're dilapidated and they've been neglected for the past 20, 30 plus years in some cases. And oftentimes, you're the guy who gets the phone call to go down and meet with them to start to begin to understand how they restore power to these buildings or how they upgrade so that they have the ability to bring in more power into these old manufacturing facilities. And what are some of the things that we've seen and you've learned along the way there?
Yeah, quite honestly, one of the big things is that the buildings are old, so they've been shut down, the power's been turned off. And a lot of developers come in and they don't ask the question of the utility company first. They don't say, oh, how much power can I get into this old building? Because a lot of times the power is not immediately available from the utility company. So that's one of the big situations. The other one is the equipment that is in there that has been turned off for a number of years basically has to be brought up to the utility company's standards today. And that means a lot of the old equipment in buildings downtown, which we've probably done 24 of them over recent years, replace all the equipment, bring it up to national grid standards in this area or another utility company in another area. So that's one of the big problems. And typically we see the owners, in the state of shock, like, I got to spend all that money to turn power on here. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to convert these buildings that at one time didn't need a lot of electricity. Now they're turning them into, data centers and situations like that needs tons of electricity. So it's a big task. And if we get in early enough, and we like to get in early to help these people out because we've done so many of these. And so from our standpoint, we typically know what has to be done and we'll help the owner get himself in the right situation up front. So at the end, it's not costing them a lot of money.
These developers, they have a lot of things on their plate when they take over these properties. They've got big ideas and great plans. And, this power issue, how to bring the equipment within these buildings, how to bring the power up to the utility standards, how to interface with the utilities so that they can get the correct power brought into the building, the correct amount of power, I should say. It's one more thing they have to do. And so we've been fortunate because you've been able to partner with a lot of these developers and walk them through that process. This is stuff that they don't do every day. Right. Interfacing with the utilities, building national grid approved service entrance, switchgear. Right. This is something they don't do every day, but fortunately, we do it every day, and you've been doing it for a long time.
A couple of
years, right? So they have the benefit of your working career experience in learning how to get this done in the most efficient, most effective, fastest manner possible.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
No question about it.
A lot of times, when the developer takes over that property, they most likely know, hey, I've got to spend some money here to bring my electrical service entrance equipment. I got to bring it up to code. I've got to get new equipment. And in a lot of cases, like you mentioned earlier, the existing facility didn't have the power. It never had the power that it needed for what the developer plans to do with that space. And in some cases, we're seeing that developer convert those old spaces into offices, hotels, but we're also seeing them convert this space into manufacturing, which demands more power. And in some cases, we're seeing the developers convert the space into data centers, which needs a ton of power, right?
You're right.
So the developers understand that they're going to spend money. But what I think we've learned along the way is sometimes they don't realize how much money it's going to take
Yeah.
to get it done, right?
Yeah.
And what are
again,
some of those costs, right?
Yeah, I mean, and again, to your point, up front, we can explain all this stuff to them, but a lot of them, they don't get to us right up front.
Right.
So then they're in a little bit in the state of shock over it. But, typically, some of the buildings that we've done recently, have a low service voltage, okay? So it's on the street, it's available, they bring it in from out there, they plug this building in and everything's fine. But if you're in an area where there's not a lot of high voltage services, then they got to bring it in from a longer way and bring in a higher voltage. So, we've experienced in a number of buildings that had to go up 1 or 2 levels in voltage, and there's a couple of $100,000 involved.
Yeah, there's a huge expense in asking the utility to upgrade the power from what might be like a 480 volt service to a 15 kV service or something higher.
Yeah.
There's a lot of expense there. There's expense that the developer has to incur with the utility, with consultants, and obviously with equipment and contractors.
Right.
Right. But I guess the thing here that one of the ways that we've been able to be successful or help developers be successful is, the sooner they call us,
Yep.
the better, right?
Yeah, they're going to find out earlier if it's even a worthwhile investment. Definitely.
Yeah, we can basically, in a lot of cases, help them to do a feasibility study
Right.
to understand what their costs are going to be
Yep.
so that they can start making decisions. They don't have to wait until they have an electrical contractor on board with them,
No, not
right?
at all.
I mean, we can start talking to these developers on day one as soon as they take ownership of their property, or even if they're just looking at purchasing a property, we can go in and help them evaluate that,
Exactly.
help educate them and to understand what it's going to take to interface with the utility
Yeah.
and what it's going to take from a cost standpoint to get that equipment up to code.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, some of these large old buildings, like the ones downtown, they don't have to do this all at once. They can do it in phases. So they say, okay, it's a 6-story building. Let's get the first 2 stories with tenants, and let's get the power in that they need. And we've done that in phases before with them and with the utility company. So they don't have to spend everything they have right up front. It can be done in stages.
Yeah, there's so many buildings downtown that we can, downtown Buffalo particularly, that we can talk about where you personally been involved working with the developer or an electrical consultant,
Yeah.
or in some cases we've been brought in by electrical contractors who are looking for help to figure these things out. I mean, one project that comes to mind is the LCO building.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you first went down there, then this was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, that service was a bit antiquated, to say the least.
Yep.
And the developer who came in had big plans that they wanted to use the building for. And speak to that a little bit, some of what we had to do there.
So what we did, we got together with the utility company. We talked about different voltages being able to brought in there and the amount of money it was. So we selected particular voltage because it was available right at the street there. So we got into the building. They've got a number of floors already occupied. And these are occupied by offices, basically not manufacturing, so it doesn't require a massive amount. But as the building has been filled with tenants, they have come back to us and said, okay, we want to do, and just, you're reading my emails, coincidentally, yesterday I got an email from LCO building, and they want to add another substation because they got more tenants going on an upper floor.
Right. So to your earlier
Yeah.
point, we can come in, we can help them establish what they need at a baseline level,
Yep.
and then help them put a plan together on how to build out the rest of their infrastructure as their tenant base grows and as they
Absolutely.
fill that space up.
Over a period of time, yeah. And it works fine. And the owner of the building's happy because he doesn't have to lay out tons of money up front. He can do it as he gets tenants in the building.
But the key to all that is getting that service entrance piece
Yeah.
correct and working with the utility.
Yeah.
And the closer you work with the utility, which we've got decades of experience of working with the local National Grid and the personnel there, and the sooner you start working with them, the quicker you can get your project.
The last thing they want to find out is at the last minute, oh, this building's going to be occupied in 4 weeks. You know, they just don't, they can't function like that. So we get them involved. The customer comes to us and we say to the customer, hey, can we go right to the utility company on your behalf? I don't remember anybody turning us down. They say, yeah, go do this for us, and we do it.
I think one of the pain points that we've seen for developers and building owners is they have an established service with the utility company and everything's fine. Even their equipment might be in good working condition and it might even be well maintained. It might be 20 or 30 years old, but it might be in excellent working condition. But now they've reached out to us and they need more power, right? And so, you know, I think one of the pain points for them is even though their equipment might be in great shape, they have to upgrade that equipment because they might want to bring in a higher voltage,
Right.
Or because we're making a change, the utility company might say, well, if you're going to make a change, this is a good time to bring your equipment up to our standards today.
Exactly.
And so that can be a pain point for the customer, right?
Yeah.
But we've learned the ways that you can minimize or mitigate the cost associated with doing that. You don't necessarily have to rip out old gear every single time. Now, there's definitely cases where it has to be done.
We do, yeah.
But there are a lot of situations that we've been involved in where, yes, the customer has to make changes, the utility's mandating it, they have to make upgrades, they have to get their equipment up to today's standards.
Right.
And we have been fortunate, we have got an excellent network of manufacturers that we work with who understand the utility's requirements and they understand what the utility will allow and what they won't allow. And so sometimes that knowledge can save a customer, a developer, or a building owner, can save them tens of thousands of dollars, if not more.
Yeah, and again, the other thing is too, if the building owner and or the developer understands this up front, they're going to know when they're negotiating with the tenant what all these upfront costs are, you know, so they don't get a tenant in there, to be honest with you, for a price too low, and then they say, oh, we'll never make any money because we had to spend a fortune on this job. So it's really, it's history is what it is. I mean, working with the utility company for years, over and over, and the utility companies are great that we work with, and they send customers to us because they have examples of jobs that the customer comes and they'll say, hey, utility company says you did this job and ours is similar, they said, and that's where we get in.
Yeah, I think it can be confusing again for, you know, a building owner, a developer. They don't get involved in electrical equipment every day. Maybe at a high level, they understand, you know, what medium voltage equipment is. But if you're not in it every day, if you don't understand the nuances of it,
right.
If you don't understand the requirements of the utility, and if you don't have the relationships at the utility, and you don't have the relationships at the manufacturers, it can be a very frustrating proposition to upgrade your equipment in your existing building. And so that's definitely one of the things that the value that we can bring to those developers who are trying to upgrade these existing services in these existing buildings, is we can use our years and years of relationships, knowledge, our mistakes that we've made along the way, and we can take all that and we can bring that to them, and we can make it as painless as possible for them, right? We can't make it free for them.
No, not free, but painless.
But we can make it relatively painless.
It's just slide it in right from the beginning. By the time it gets to the end, it's not hurting them. Sometimes a developer will come and say, hey, we're going to buy this field out here, and we're going to turn this into, you know, data centers or whatever, and can you give us an idea what the electricity is going to cost, you know? And that's their question. That's all they know. How much is it going to be to get the electricity there? And we've done that before they've even purchased.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me how early we've gotten involved in some of these projects, right? Like we were talking earlier, some of these projects have gone on for years, if not a decade or more in some
right.
cases,
Yeah,
right?
they have.
And it's a process for it's a significant process for a developer to buy an old existing building and to take advantage of all the tax incentives that there might be, and to navigate a very tricky road for power upgrades and all of the other upgrades that they have to do to that building, because they're not just doing power upgrades, right?
Nope.
They're spending thousands, if not millions of dollars to rehab these facilities. And it's interesting to me how long these projects can take sometime.
Yeah.
They take years. But I think to your earlier point, the sooner that these individuals come to us and they find us, the sooner they can have peace of mind that we can help them, get them the answers that they need. And it's interesting to see how many of those conversations that started as just, I'm thinking about doing this, or, what's a high level budget to do this. It's interesting to me how many of those particular conversations have turned into these developers, asking us to, engage with them and partner with them and bring other relationships and resources into the equation, whether it's consultants or in some cases electrical contractors, and of course our manufacturing network. And we've been able to bring all those pieces of the puzzle together for them. And it's interesting how many of those projects actually have come to fruition. And then after that, they continue to make changes and upgrades.
Exactly. Down the road, they come back to us because we've helped them, we continue to help them, and they're pretty confident that we know what we're doing.
Are you going to work here forever?
Am I going to work here forever?
Because they're counting on you.
They are, yes.
Yeah,
they are counting
they
on
are
me.
counting on you.
Well, I was planning on another 19 years after this year. Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds great.